Hey guys, and welcome to the Men's Masculine Vulnerability Workshop and Webinar. Super excited to be with you today. We're going to be breaking down my book, Big Boys Do Cry, A Man's Guide to Navigating Emotions and Showing Up More Vulnerable in Relationships. If you're a man that has struggled to identify and express his thoughts, feelings, and emotions, maybe you've had your wife, your spouse, your partner, your family members coming to you saying, man, you're really closed down and I really need you to communicate more with me. This webinar is for you. It's going to teach you how to express and identify your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and then communicate those in a healthy and emotionally regulated way. Hang with me at the end of this webinar. I'm going to have a very special offer for you. It's going to have two different parts if you want to work with me one-on-one, or if you want to join my 8-week men's vulnerability coaching program. It's going to be a special discount that you get just for watching this webinar. So thanks, and let's dive in. Hey guys, all right, let's dive in. Big Boys Do Cry, A Man's Guide to Navigating Emotions and Showing Up More Vulnerable in Relationships. Let's get this webinar kick-started. So the first thing that I want to speak about is the men in your life and generational trauma. So much of what we learn as kids about what it means to be a man comes from the men in our life. Sometimes it also can come from the absence of the men in our life. So let's dial in there. In Big Boys Do Cry, I speak about my great-grandfather, my two grandfathers, and my father. What I want you to do is to think about, hey, what did I learn from the men in my life growing up? Did they teach me about vulnerability? For instance, did they ever come to me and say, hey buddy, I love you so much. I noticed that you were crying. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what was going on? For many of the men that I work with as a counselor, and even for myself, I don't think I ever heard that growing up. And so it's important for us to ask ourselves, right, hey, what did we learn about how to identify and express our thoughts, feelings, and emotions? What did or didn't we learn about how to be vulnerable with those that we love, particularly with the women in our life? Very often us men say, okay, I got to be tough, I've got to be strong. It's not okay for me to be vulnerable. It's not okay for me to cry, particularly with the women in my life, because I've got to be the supporter. And so in this part, I want you to really take a moment, pause the webinar, and think about, hey, whether it was my great-grandfather or grandfather or uncle or father or some combination thereof, right? What did I learn from those men about emotions and about vulnerability? Now, this is so critical because it's not an excuse, right? It's not a get out of jail free card. But if we can figure out, hey, here's what I didn't learn, then it empowers us to take the opportunity to say, okay, now it's time for me to learn these things, right? And that's a big reason why I wrote Big Boys Do Cry, is because it's an opportunity to learn, hey, how do I identify and express my thoughts, feelings, and emotions in a regulated way? How do I show up more vulnerable? But in order to figure out where the gaps are kind of in that emotional education, we have to take a step back and look at, hey, what was it that I learned? What was it that I didn't learn? Now, the other aspect of this is generational trauma. Generational trauma basically means, hey, what was some of the trauma that my grandparents or father or mother, whatever the case may be, right? What was that family tree? What did that look like? Because that can quite literally get passed on throughout these generations. Now, here's the cool part. You guys have an opportunity to be generational trauma chain breakers. Because as we figure out what was that we didn't learn and what it is that we now want to implement, that right there, guys, is what helps us to break the chains of generational trauma. So think about, what did you learn? What didn't you learn? And what is it that you want to learn, or what is it that you want to change? So you can be that generational trauma change breaker. Okay, guys, big boys do cry. Let's talk about the mask. Now, the mask is something that I wore for a long time in my life, and in my clinical work with men, I very often see that this is something that they wear as well. The mask, I think, comes in two different forms, right? It comes from what it was we learned, which we just spoke about in the previous section there. And that was, hey, what did we learn that it meant to be a man from the men in our life growing up? So the mask can be conceptualized by, okay, so what was it that I was told I needed to be as a young boy in order to be a man? So that component of the mask is something that's learned. The other aspect of the mask is what society tells us it means to be a man, to be a tough guy, right? So I'd invite you to think about, hey, what is my mask? Am I wearing a mask? What do I perceive that it means to be a tough guy or to be a man in this world? Because that mask can really, at times, hold us back from being able to connect into our heart and to show up vulnerable in our relationships. And if all we do is wear the mask, we're not really being authentic of who we are. You know, for a long time, I wore the mask. I didn't feel that it was safe to be vulnerable. I didn't feel it was safe to get into my heart and connect in with the pain and the sadness that I felt from the death of my mother and sister. So I want to invite you to take a moment now and really think about, hey, what is the mask? Am I putting it on every single day? Am I wearing it 24/7, 365? Am I afraid to take it off? And how could my life be different if for a moment, if only for a moment, I decided to take that mask off and to be more vulnerable in my relationship? So take a second now and think about, hey, what is the mask? What encompasses wearing that mask? And how could my life be different if I took that mask off? Okay, guys, so let's dive into the next phase of the webinar. We're going to speak about left brain versus right brain, as well as the physiology of crying. So, did you know that as a baby in the womb, you actually cried? Yes, that's right. As a baby in the womb, you actually cried. And all babies, healthy babies anyways, cry after birth, and that's actually a sign of a healthy baby. So if you're like me and you didn't cry for a long time, or you think that you've never cried, right? That's wrong. You cried at least once when the doctor slapped you on the behind when you came out of the womb. So we've all cried at least at one point in time in our life. You know, crying is a physiological response that is so important for helping us to be able to better, regulate our emotions. As men, we were told it's not safe to cry, right? Big boys don't cry. But crying is actually an incredible way of being able to regulate our emotions in a healthy way. Now, let's talk about this idea of left brain versus right brain. As men, we're more left brain dominant. We're more logic. We're problem solvers. That's why many men work as police officers, firefighters, first responders, military. Very, very left brain, very, very logical, okay? Problem, solution. We don't need to get into our hearts. We don't need to be creative to execute on those things. And that left brain is very, very hardwired in to most men. Now, that makes us great in many different ways. It also can limit us if we can't toggle into that right side of our brain, if we can't toggle into those emotions, right? And that creativity, and ultimately get down into our heart. That's what being vulnerable is all about. It's about living from our heart. So I share that to say that it's important to understand as men, we're more hardwired into being logical problem solvers. But if we're going to communicate with our wife, our spouse, our partner, maybe even our kids, they may be more in the right side of their brain. They be more in their emotions. And so we need to understand how to get, okay, when do I need to be in my left brain? When do I need to be in my right brain? And how does living for my right brain and living for my heart help me to facilitate safety in relationships? Safety is so important, right? So if I'm right brain, if I'm in my heart, if I'm creating that safe ground, now I can create deeper levels of connection. Hey guys, so in this part of the webinar, we're going to speak about identifying emotions and understanding triggers. You know, in my work as a counselor, a lot of what comes up for men is typically, I feel angry, I feel a lot of pressure, and I feel unsupported. So let's start with anger. Anger is often that top level of emotion, right? That's the emotion that we very often express out to other people. But if we peel back the onion or we go underneath the layers of that, it's quite often I feel pressure or I feel unsupported. You know, being unsupported as a man is very difficult and tricky to navigate because as men, as little boys, right, we were taught, no, it's not safe to ask for help. Just buck up and deal with it. You got this, man, right? Don't ask for help. That's a sign of weakness. So underneath that anger, right, is, hey, I'm feeling unsupported and I feel unsafe to be able to ask for help. Now, the other big part of this is triggers, right? So the triggers come down to, hey, there's something inside of me that causes this emotional dysregulation. I'm not aware of what that underlying emotion is, but I'm going to express it out as anger. So I want to invite you to think about, hey, these couple times that I've been feeling angry in my life, what was that about, right? It's the motorcycles that you hear in the background, right? It's that revving, it's that anger, right? But what's underneath the anger? Is it that you're feeling unsupported? Is it that you feel like you have some emotional wants and needs that haven't been communicated? Because often underneath the anger is that feeling unsupported. But underneath the unsupported is, hey, do I feel okay to be vulnerable to communicate my emotional wants and needs? All right, guys, so we're going to take the webinar into the next level here. We're going to talk about the absence of war is not peace. The absence of war is not peace. In my clinical work that I do with men, they've got a lot going on inside, right? A lot of different suppressed trauma or pain, and it creates this emotional dysregulation, which makes communication with those that they love challenging, right? Because there's so much chaos going on inside. Now, it may not look like that to their outside world, right? To somebody looking in at them, they may not say like, wow, it looks like you got all this crazy stuff going on inside, like you got this internal tug of war going on inside. But if we have suppressed pain and we have unexpressed thoughts, feelings, and emotions, right, this can create that dysregulation inside that makes communication so difficult. So in this next section of the webinar, we're going to speak about, okay, now how do I begin to communicate these feelings that I have inside, right? These emotions that we were speaking about before, with anger, with pressure, with unsupported, okay? How can I begin to, in a healthy way, communicate with those that I love, my spouse, my kids, my partner? How can I communicate these emotions in a healthy and emotionally regulated way? Okay, guys, so let's talk about the power of asking for help. And I'm going to challenge you here in this part of the webinar. I really want to challenge you to be vulnerable and to know that it's okay to ask for help. You know, one of the key parts of facilitating healthy and effective communication is for you to be able to say to your wife or your partner, hey, I'm struggling here and I could use a little bit of help. You know, the other cool thing about this, guys, is that as we ask for help and as we begin to become more vulnerable, we will actually find that as we express our wants and our needs, our wife and our spouse is overjoyed and so happy that we're being vulnerable that they want to do everything they can to help meet our needs. So I really want to empower you and encourage you to know that it's okay to ask for help. Emotional flexibility. That is one of the key things to being able to navigate conflict. Being emotionally flexible means that it's okay to say, hey, I'm sorry, I dropped the ball, I made a mistake. What happens when we're emotionally flexible and we're willing to apologize and to take ownership is that it helps to de-escalate conflict. One of the best ways to navigate conflict is to first start out by de-escalating it, right? So being emotionally flexible, being able to say, hey, I made a mistake, or hey, this is something that I'm working on and I could use a little bit of help and grace in the process. These are key aspects of how to navigate conflict. It's also a key aspect to not put so much pressure on ourselves of holding it in, right? Guys, we don't have to be perfect. Our partner, our spouse is not asking us to be perfect. They're asking us to be real. They're asking us ultimately to be vulnerable, because that's what's going to help to facilitate safety in the communication and safety within the relationship. So I want to encourage and invite you to be emotionally flexible, that you don't have to hold it inside, and it's okay to say, hey, this is something that I'm struggling with. So I want to invite you right now to take some time, grab a pen and paper, and write down, hey, what is it that I'm struggling with? In what ways do I feel like I'm still growing, I'm still working, I'm still kind of going through my own personal development? And write those down, and then I want to invite you to share them with your spouse or your partner to say, hey, I've been doing some work, here's the areas that I'm working on, here's the areas where I could continue to use your help in. Okay, so this part of the webinar, guys, we're going to talk about the broken little boy inside. You know, I think that for any of us that have experienced pain or trauma in our life, there's a part of us that is that broken little boy inside. And even as a man today, that broken little boy is there. And he's there, he's looking to keep us safe, he's looking to protect us. And at one point in time, that served us in our life, but now it no longer does. So at this point in the webinar, I want to invite you to take a second, really think about, hey, during my childhood, when was there that time where there was that little boy who was made to feel unsafe? He was made to feel it wasn't okay to be him. Or maybe he quite literally experienced some form of trauma. Because that broken little boy is still inside of us. You know, for me, just before my third birthday, when my mother and unborn sister were killed, there was that piece of me, that broken little boy inside, that would pop out, right? He would come out through abandonment issues and come out through the sense of, hey, nope, don't do that in that relationship. It's not safe. So I want to invite you to think about, hey, if there is that broken little boy inside of me, if I did experience that trauma, where is he? Where is he stuck? Who is he? And what does he need to hear so that he can now feel safe? Because you're not that same broken little boy that you were. Now you're a grown man, but that broken boy doesn't understand that, right? He doesn't get that. So he's going to pop up and create dysfunction, not because that part of you is trying to hurt you or trying to create dysfunction. He's actually trying to protect you. But because you're not that same little boy anymore, he doesn't need to show up in that way. So I want you to take a second and write down here, hey, what are those areas in which I feel like that broken boy is affecting me in my life today? And how can I love on him? What is it that he needs to hear so that he can feel safe to know he doesn't have to keep coming up to protect me? Okay, guys, let's bring this webinar home. We're going to talk about the power of the team effort. Now, guys, I may be a little bit biased here as a licensed mental health counselor and professional counselor associate. I may be a little bit biased, but my friend Billy and former therapist really helped to change my life in such a magical way. You know, a big part of my own healing journey to write this book started from the work that I did with Billy Mercedes, which, by the way, if you live in New Jersey, I would highly recommend you checking out Billy. In any event, the power of the team effort, the power of asking for help, not only from our spouse and our partner, right, but also from a trained professional. Guys, this can really be a game changer. So at this point in time, I want to get you to think about, maybe if you have worked with a counselor and you aren't currently, to think about maybe re-engaging and taking another shot at it from a deeper level. And if you've never started counseling before, I want to highly, highly encourage you and invite you to open up your mind to the possibility of working with a therapist or a counselor or some kind of mental health professional that can help to guide you through this process of healing. So it's a team effort. It's not something we have to do by ourselves. Quite honestly, it's not something that we should do by ourselves only. Yes, there is some personal work to this, but I want to really encourage you to reach out, ask for help, take a moment, pause the webinar right now, do a quick Google search, Psychology Today, Mental Health Match. There's a bunch of different online resources and databases that you can use where you can, find who accepts your insurance, who doesn't, some of the different areas that they work on. So I really want to encourage you, ask for help. There's a power in teamwork. I believe in you guys. It's not easy, but I promise you it'll be worth it. Here's the bonus chapter to the webinar, the divine masculine and the divine feminine. Now, I'm giving this to you as a bonus chapter because I understand this may not resonate with everybody, and I'm totally okay with that. If you had spoke to me about this topic 5 years ago, I would have said, Ryan, you're crazy. I don't know what you're talking about, man. Go have another drink, right? So I understand this topic may not resonate with everybody, but I just see it so much in my work that I would be remiss if I don't speak about it with you on the webinar and I dive into it more in the book, right? So the divine masculine, we could really just define as that masculine energy, right? That problem solver, that fixer, okay, let's put it in the box and let's get it taken care of. The divine feminine is that creative side. It's that nurturing side. It's that side that needs a little bit of structure to it. Otherwise, it can go a little bit too haywire. So as men, we very, very strongly embody that divine masculine, right? That protector, that warrior, that, hey, we're going to get the problem solved. But we also have that divine feminine inside of us as well, that nurturer. And before you say, whoa, just think about this. If you've got kids, if there's somebody that you love that they're maybe hurting, right? That part of you that wants to go and protect them, to go and care for them, right? That is also part of your divine feminine. So we have we have opportunities to access both of them, okay? Just in the same way that the women in our life that are more divine feminine, right, also have that opportunity to step into their divine masculine. So there's the divine masculine and there's the divine feminine. And if you want to explore this more, I speak about it in the book and in my one-on-one clinical work, and as a part of my 8-week vulnerability men's group coaching program, we also dive into that as well. But this is a little bonus chapter for you, the divine masculine, the divine feminine. Hey guys, so thank you for sticking with me here with the webinar. I promise you at the end of this, I was going to have a special offer for you. So since you stayed to the end of the webinar, I want to offer you a very exclusive opportunity to join my 8-week men's vulnerability coaching program. We're going to expand on everything that we spoke about here in the webinar today and dive in more to give you even more actionable tips, tools, and strategies on how you can execute on some of what it was that we discussed today. Also, if you decide to join the 8-week men's vulnerability coaching program, I'm going to give you access to my holistic online academy. This is going to help you to better understand your mind, your body, triggers, and the mind-body connection. So it's a little bit more of the detail of the science behind what's going on inside of us that's causing us to feel so emotionally dysregulated. So if you sign up for the 8-week men's vulnerability coaching program, you're also going to get access to all of my online resources as it relates to my holistic wellness program. And you're also going to get an opportunity to get my first book called Unlock the Power of Your Mind. And in that book, I share a lot more vulnerably about my life so you can get a better understanding of, hey, listen, this is what it was that Ryan was able to overcome. And I don't share that because I want to talk about myself. I share that to be vulnerable with you, to let you know that, hey, if this is where I came from, and guys, I came from a low spot, almost 30 years of no crime. But if that's where I can come from and be here today, you can do the same thing too. So thank you for hanging with me until the very end. Sign up for the 8-week men's vulnerability coaching program and get access to a whole bunch of other resources as well.